I'm Gary Venner, Managing Director of IFA Acquisitions, and I'm joined by Alex Cannon, Partner of Herrington Carmichael, where we continue our informative question and answer series under our YouTube channel to provide top tips when selling an IFA business and an insight into the legal processes when buying or selling an IFA business by two industry experts. The title of the next video is coming up on screen now.
In terms of actions that sellers can take prior to sale, what sort of preparation would you say that sellers should be doing to ensure that they're getting maximum value through the sale process?
Yeah, well, first of all, data is really important, and guesswork is not really going to happen here to help the sale process at all. So certainly making sure that a vendor has a good handle on their clients. We as a broker would certainly ask for this information, and either it can be provided on a spreadsheet, or if somebody's got, for instance, Intelligent Office, reports can be pulled off. We like to see, and clients can be anonymised. We do not want to see the client names. However, what is important would be around the age of the client, because that looks at longevity for return on investment. We look at location, particularly if it's high net worth clients that would continue to receive face-to-face servicing reviews. It's important that we know where those clients actually live. We'd also look to the type of the product plan, the plan type, and the product provider. So that gives us a great insight into alignment in investment models as well. The amount invested, and also the recurring income as well. Going beyond that, we would ask the vendor to very much make sure that their files are up together. So you would expect to see, fact finds and the most recent recommendation reports for past advice in there, together with money laundering and data protection declarations and the client fee agreement as well. Now, if you've got good client files, that will help massively in the process.
Of course, yeah.
With regards to higher risk areas of investment, we would look to probe much more on those, and so DB pension transfers come to mind, especially there. So again, making sure there's sufficient information available right from the off on those arrangements. So for instance, on those pensions, we would want to know the value at transfer. We would want to know the seeding scheme. We want to know the age as well. Certainly, if there were a lot of transfers done for people younger than 50, we would start to question that, and the rationale behind those transfers. And I think, if taking it a stage further, has external auditors, compliance auditors, actually had a look at those higher risk areas as well. And it might be a good preparation to consider getting that done, to make sure that you've got an external compliance look at making sure the gold standard was actually achieved there as well.
I think there's a lot to be said for that, actually, in terms of having somebody come in and actually look at the files, because all too often, especially where you're busy running the business, you're doing things to the best of your ability, but having an objective opinion on how good your files actually are, especially if they're a smaller firm, is probably quite a good thing to do.
Most definitely, and I think it just really adds value. At the end of the day, the acquirer is still going to put their own due diligence team in, but it's going to really start discussions at a much earlier stage and much more interest in the business as well.
Yeah. And I think it goes as well, sort of right through that process. You talk about data. One of the key things that's sort of music to our ears as lawyers is people being able to access accurate data relating to everything across their business, because when you get into the diligence phase, it gives confidence to a buyer, doesn't it? When they see that it's readily available, it's accurate, and it's in good order as well.
Yeah, and even if we're looking at asset purchases, we're still going to expect that due diligence to be done on the actual recurring income that's come through. So good accounting records, making sure that they're all available as well. I would just also say that the other aspect would be that just making sure to look at the service propositions as well. So there will inevitably be lower value clients, but has the clients been segmented into different types of service propositions? Because an acquirer will want to make sure they can continue to provide a service for an appropriate cost as well. So all these things would certainly help to prepare the business. And it depends how long the process is as well, because some may decide to move their fee structure upwards, and certainly it may increase the valuation by doing so. But if a client suddenly has an increase in fee and then in 6 months' time they're going to be sold, then that probably is sort of an alarm bell, and it wouldn't always work to the advantage of the seller as well.
And you mentioned about sort of as part of the information looking at the different sort of platform providers and the sort of service propositions and things that they've got in place at the moment. Do you find that a lot of buyers are looking for alignment on that with what they've got already, or are most of them reasonably flexible in terms of the target firms they're looking at, if it's a good quality client bank, even if they are on sort of using different propositions or sort of investment strategies?
Yeah, definitely. Again, it's alignment to the acquirer's centralised investment proposition, which inevitably they will have in place. So, for instance, client banks that are overweight in bonds, for instance, are probably not going to be as attractive as more modern solutions which are platform-based. We talked about the different types of warranties. What are the type of restrictive covenants that vendors can expect? E.g., can they come back into the industry and being an advisor or own an IFA business in the future? What's the typical restrictive covenants there?
So restrictive covenants are going to be a feature in any transaction contract, whether that's an asset deal or a share deal. The majority of restrictive covenants will sort of last probably for about 3 or 4 years in most transactions, and they'll prevent in a share transaction, certainly the shareholders being involved in the industry for that period of time. They'll prevent them soliciting or working with the clients, so for another firm or in another capacity to provide financial services to them. And it'll also generally prevent them from going and soliciting the staff as well, encouraging them to go and work elsewhere. Now, if you've got shareholders who are perhaps, say, they're not active in the business, a wife or a child or somebody who has long since retired, for example, or gone off to do something else and doesn't work in the industry, then sometimes we might see them exempted from the non-compete covenant, but we'd still expect them to provide the sort of non-dealing of clients and non-solicitation covenants around clients and staff. So those covenants, again, sort of be time-bound, and we do see occasionally advisors coming back sort of 3 or 4 years later and going back into the industry. Some of them have absolutely no intentions to do that for various different reasons, and I think from a buyer's perspective, if you're buying from somebody who is retiring, that obviously the risk around covenants and things is less important. If, however, you've got sellers who are perhaps in their 30s or 40s or even into their 50s, actually that is probably a greater risk. Because after 3 years, say on restrictive covenant, they would be entitled to go and do that. And it's very difficult from a buyer's perspective to have a covenant for longer than that sort of period of time. It starts becoming unenforceable at that length.
I think in these situations, a lot of element of trust is there.
Absolutely.
And certainly when I have vendors come to us that are, say, 40s, 50s, that want to sell their business, most are open to these restrictive covenants being in the contract, and but it will put off some acquirers too, because there is this concern after 3-4 years that they would be free to come back, and there is a concern because of the return on investment, needing to make sure that the clients don't suddenly come,
very much so,
taken away again.
And one of the things that we find is a useful tool for buyers, and where we're working on that side of the table, is all about integration. Because where we've seen issues arise in the past is where buyers don't integrate the selling advisor's clients into the wider business, and they effectively leave them as a standalone advisor. They leave them with their existing clients, and the end of 3 years comes around. They've paid them their deferred consideration, their covenants have run out, and there's actually no then loyalty between the clients and the buyer firm or the new advisors that have been put in there. So I think from a buyer's perspective, it's not just about the covenants, it's about how you structure the wider transaction and what you do post-completion to try and mitigate the impact of that person leaving at any given point.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and switch on notifications so that you won't miss our next video in this series of top tips when buying or selling an IFA business, and an insight into the legal processes by two industry experts, me, Gary Venner, MD of one of the UK's largest specialist brokers in IFA acquisitions, and Alex Cannon, partner from Herrington Carmichael, who are leading commercial lawyers specialising in IFA mergers and acquisitions.